This is macOS Ken.
Apple pledges disaster relief in Myanmar. The EU may go easy on Apple and Meta. And another suit against Apple over AI promises. It is Monday, the 31st of March, 2025. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from macOS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSCan. News today that's both heartening and kind of disappointing. Apple Insider had Apple CEO Tim Cook hitting the hell site on Sunday, pledging donations to relief efforts in Myanmar and Thailand after a pair of devastating earthquakes last Friday. Citing a BBC report on Sunday, the piece says the death toll from the Myanmar earthquake has surpassed 1,700 people, with more than 3,400 people injured. Survivors and bodies are still being pulled out from collapsed buildings. 18 people died in Thailand as well. A second earthquake measuring 6.4 magnitude struck approximately 12 minutes after the first one. In the tragedy's wake, Apple CEO posted, "Our hearts go out to all those in Myanmar and Thailand affected by the devastating earthquake. Apple is donating to support relief efforts on the ground." Heartening, as I say. The disappointing part, though, currently at least, the company is not facilitating donations from the public. Earlier this year, Apple welcomed donations through services such as Apple Music, the App Store, and Apple Podcasts for wildfire relief efforts in and around Los Angeles. It's something Apple used to do a lot. I remember donating through iTunes for Hurricane Katrina relief way back in 2005. Stopped doing that over the last few years. Personally, I welcome the return in January, because it's good to be able to give when you can through a service that's secure and that's already got your payment information. Kinda curious, why not this time? And maybe it'll change. Back in January, Apple pledged support of its own for wildfire relief about a week before it opened avenues for public donations. And maybe they'll do that again. Word on the street has the European Union taking it easy on Apple and Meta, apparently to please the US president. According to a piece from the Financial Times, the EU is set to impose minimal fines on Apple and Facebook owner Meta this week under its Digital Markets Act, as Brussels seeks to avoid escalating tensions with US President Donald Trump. Hey, remember that time Apple pledged $500 billion in U.S. investments over the next 4 years, and the next day Apple shareholders voted to keep the company's inclusion and diversity initiatives in place, and the president landed on Apple like a bag of hammers? But you do you, EU. Try to please him. I'm sure that's going to be effective. The two companies won't walk away blameless. The piece says Apple is expected to be fined and ordered to resolve its App Store rules over anti-steering concerns. Meta is expected to be fined in order to change its pay or consent proposition that forces users to either consent to digital tracking or pay a subscription fee for an ad-free Meta experience. Such violations could cost the companies penalties of up to 10% of their global turnover, according to the Financial Times, while the commission is now said to be aiming for fines that fall far below that 10% threshold. The report says levying any form of fines on American tech companies risks a backlash, as Trump has directly attacked EU penalties on American companies, calling them a form of taxation, while comparing fines on tech companies with overseas extortion. Hey, maybe if they tell him it could have been worse. No? You don't think so? Oh well. This next story kind of makes me feel like a dope. You know, I'd predicted a lawsuit against Apple for its smarter Siri promises that ended up being delayed. Yeah, that's not the part that makes me feel like a dope. The part that makes me feel like a dope, I had a lawsuit in my head. Silly me. Apparently, with fewer bleeps to give than the EU, folks in Canada's British Columbia are targeting the Cupertino company with a class action suit. The Vancouver Sun says a Canada-wide class action lawsuit has been launched in British Columbia, alleging Apple Canada engaged in misleading advertising when it marketed the iPhone 16 by promising it would include innovative artificial intelligence features that it did not have. The argument that Apple promised a lot of really cool features that would require an iPhone 15 Pro or an iPhone 16 of some sort. As such, says the suit, consumers paid an unlawful price premium for the iPhone 16 model smartphone that they did not need based on artificial intelligence features that did not exist. The suit accuses Apple and Apple Canada of breach of contract, fraud, deceit, and unjust enrichment under provincial consumer protection laws and the Federal Competition Act. While plaintiffs say Apple knows well the rules and laws against false advertising, the suit argues that in the race for AI market share, it decided to violate them anyway, misleading customers into believing that the products possessed AI features, functions, and benefits the products simply do not have and, according to company and industry insiders, may never have. I really look forward to this story going away. In like 3 or 4 years, maybe. Apple's syncopated seeding continues. Mac Rumors says the Cupertino company seeded the second release candidates of iOS and iPadOS 18.4 to developers on Friday. The article goes over the stuff we're already expecting, including priority notifications, a food section for Apple News Plus, the long-awaited sketch style for Image Playground, and stuff like that. The next round of OS updates from Apple is expected sometime in April. I've seen more than one article say it's expected this week, though, if memory serves, sometime in April is the only indication given by Apple. And finally today, there's something new for iPhone users in the EU, or there will be. A piece from 9to5Mac says folks in the European Union can now set Google Maps as their default navigation app on Apple's communicator, or they will be able to soon. Google on Friday released a major update for Google Maps users on iOS, according to the report. While the headline says they can make Google Maps their navigation default now, the text of the article says the option to choose a navigation app other than Apple Maps will be available to users in the EU with iOS 18.4, which is expected to be released to the public in the next few days. That update hit one day after another default option that I totally missed last week. It was late last week that Mac Rumors ran a piece saying that WhatsApp can now be selected as the default calling and messaging app on iPhone, but this time not just in the EU. According to that report, a change in the latest version of WhatsApp available on the App Store causes the Meta-owned encrypted chat platform to now show up in the messaging and calling options list in iOS. The piece explains, if you select WhatsApp for messaging and or calling, your iPhone will automatically open the app when called upon instead of Apple's built-in options, Messages and Phone or FaceTime. I went to double check whether that was available by going to Settings, then Apps, then Default Apps. There I found both Messages and WhatsApp as options for messaging. Under Calls I found FaceTime, iPhone, WhatsApp, and Zoom, which I had totally forgotten was even on my phone. What is this, 2021? Not available as defaults for messaging and calling or Skype, which is not surprising, and Signal, which is somewhat surprising. Also not available as messaging defaults are Yahoo Messenger and AOL Instant Messenger, because it's not 2004. and wishing will not make it so. So, in this time of economic uncertainty, advertisers seem to have pulled back a lot. Currently, there are none on the schedule for the foreseeable future, and I can see the schedule through the end of this year. That may change, of course. I know the folks at Backbeat do what they can. Right now, though, at least for this show, there is a lot of nothing on the horizon. So to those of you who support this show through Patreon, thank you. I am truly grateful. If you're somebody who's always thought, gee, I should do that, well, Patreon pledges get tallied tomorrow. No guilt and no worries if you can't or you simply don't want to. But if you can, and you do, that would be greatly appreciated. Now here's me to tell you how. macOS Can, brought to you by me and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOScan. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macoscan.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Can. I'm Ken Ray.
Leonard likes this post.